Chapter 3. The Lads. Brrr, brrr, brrr. The front door buzzer at 174 Antrim Road was already starting to get on my wick. It buzzed me first thing in the morning like an urban cock-a-doodle-doo if any of my colleagues chose an early start to their day. Often it screeched throughout the night when mischievous youth club members or passing drunks pushed the button with the sole intention of disturbing me. But this evening it was buzzing because the volunteers were arriving for the preparations and prayer meeting before the Tuesday night over 14s youth club. I was to be youth leader in charge, which was like being appointed head keeper at Belfast Zoo, but marginally more dangerous. This senior club was regarded as the toughest in the salt shaker because the young people were generally uncontrollable. But I enjoyed it most of all the youth activities because I felt it offered a real opportunity to get to know the young people, have decent conversations and try to help them with their problems. This was the most violent square mile in the most violent part of the most violent city in Northern Ireland. The youth unemployment rate was 90%. But I was determined that I would make a difference to these young people's lives. I wanted the Salt Shaker to be the best youth club in Belfast, even if our resources were limited. 5 or 6 volunteers, a damaged pool table with missing balls and a box of broken board games. The aims of the youth club were to give the young people somewhere safe to go and something positive to do. The alternatives were underage drinking in the parks, getting involved in sectarian riots or hanging around the street corners, which were often targeted for drive-by shootings by the paramilitaries. Young people could drop into the youth club between 8 and 10 every Tuesday night to play table tennis, pool or board games, or just to have a chat with each other and the youth leaders over a snack from the tuck shop. The voluntary youth leaders came from the local Baptist church, the summer team and the Christian unions at Queen's University and Jordanstown. Most young believers in Northern Ireland would have preferred a missionary posting to Africa to getting their hands dirty on these streets. So these volunteers were a special minority, courageous, committed and idealistic. Tonight's crew of Alan, Bill, Lois, Jamesy and Christine were among the most faithful and reliable. I dashed down the stairs, darting off a quick prayer that I would do a good job on my first night as leader, that a good number of young people would turn up, that there would be an opportunity to share the love of God, and that loyalist paramilitaries would not target us for a drive-by shooting. This horrific possibility was always on my mind. I opened the door with a smile. A tall, ginger figure confronted me. "Is it not open yet?" asked Tonto. "It's not open for another half hour, Tonto," I replied. "Fuck's sake," scowled Mo, standing beside him. "Won't be long," I said, spotting the volunteers making their way through the group of around 10 teenagers who were now standing at the front door of the Salt Shaker waiting for the youth club to open. "All right, lads, calm down now, will you?" implored Alan. "Open it now or we'll burn it down," shouted Soup, only slagging tone, and he winked. "We just have to have a wee meeting and a quick prayer and we'll be down to open up," I explained calmly, holding the door firmly with one hand and ushering in the volunteers. Mo began to kick the steel security grills on the front door. "Them fucking Brits is spying on us," complained Jerry, pointing to the army watchtower. The commotion did appear to be gaining some attention from someone inside the security post, visible only through the steel slit as a pair of eyes. "Chucky our la!" shouted Marty. "Won't be long," I said, resting the door closed and heading upstairs to the bedsit. The volunteers sat down for a quick meeting, while the doorbell buzzed incessantly for a full half hour. After deciding who would do the front door, who would monitor the pool tournament, and who would keep an eye on the money in the tuck shop, we asked God to protect us, to give us patience, and to help us to show Christian love to the young people of the youth club, no matter what the provocation. "Yo!" cried the group of impatient teenagers when we finally came downstairs to open up. "'Bout fucking time," shouted Den, his eyes open unnaturally wide. The youth club members spilled in through the door in a heavy mass of torn jeans, worn-out leather jackets and cigarettes in front of most of the volunteers. As a result, Tonto and Mo didn't pay their admission fee of 20p each, and in spite of repeated requests, managed to avoid settlement for the rest of the night. Soup grabbed the fire extinguisher from the wall and jumped up onto one of the tables, brandishing the spray tube like a weapon. "I'm gonna empty this over the whole bloody lot of yous!" he shouted with glee. "Scuffles!" echoed around the room. They had heard the word scuffles used by a posh English reporter on the BBC National News to describe a street disturbance that some of them had been involved in. They thought this was a ridiculous British choice of words, and ever since had shouted "Scuffles!" at the start of every fight. "Come on now, Soup, stop messing. If you do that, you'll be barred, I'm warning you," I said. "Who gives a fuck?" shouted Soup, his eyes opening ever wider with excitement. Soup was a good lad who had been dealt an unfair hand. He had been orphaned when a British Army tank had crashed into his innocent parents, killing them both. Although I was only 5 years older than him, I felt fatherly towards him. In spite of the pain he had endured, he had a good sense of humour and an infectious smile. Although he messed around as much as his mates, I sensed I could trust Soup. Even though it would have been understandable for him to be bitter, he was not obsessed with violence or vengeance. Soup gave me hope. He deserved a better start in life than this city had given him. I wanted to do what I could do to help him and find some good opportunities in life. He spent too much time in the bookies, and I wanted to help him to get some training and a decent job. As Patsy and Colette ran in through the door without paying their 20p's, Soup thrust the tube of the fire extinguisher between his legs and shook it suggestively towards the girls. "Wise up," shouted Patsy. "It's only as big as that in your dreams, wee lad." "Come on, everyone. Remember the youth club rules," I said, attempting to assert some authority. "No violence, no swearing, and no damaging the equipment." Still brandishing the fire extinguisher, Soup shouted, "I'll smash this over your fucking head," breaking all 3 rules in one sentence. "Fuck you up, wee lad," interjected Colette. "Sure, you suck dead dogs' dicks." "Girls, really?" said Lois, in an attempt to calm things down. The girls and boys usually socialised separately in the youth club, but although the girls were always a minority, they were as fierce as any of the lads given cause. A scuffle ensued. "Scuffles!" shouted everyone. It seemed my work was going to be cut out for me here as leader in charge of the uncontrollable. I never knew what to expect on a Tuesday night. Drink, drugs, and the latest street violence made it very unpredictable. I worried that if it got completely out of control, one of the young people or one of the youth leaders might be seriously assaulted. As Jamesy and Christine set to regaining control of the entrance, Lois managed access to the tuck shop and Alan took on supervision of the back room with the pool table, and I negotiated with Soup. He finally climbed down for a smoke and admitted he had no intention of actually spraying the room with the fire extinguisher. "I just wanted to see your bake tone. I was only slagging, and you were kicking your brakes," he laughed. "It was class." In a bid to maintain some authority, I tried to stifle a laugh. Soup was the sort of person that you liked instantly. In a moment of calm, I invited Jeff and Michael, who'd just arrived, to join me in a Connect 4 competition. Jeff was generally more sensible than most of his peers and unusually gentle for a teenage boy in North Belfast. He loved animals and was genuinely interested in God. Michael was blonde and handsome and keen to assert that he was the most intelligent member of the club. I planned to let them win a few games just to build up some rapport. 6 consecutive defeats later, along with the requisite taunts and celebrations, I realised that such magnanimity would not be required. It did seem that Michael probably was the most intelligent, albeit the biggest slabber in the youth club. A subsequent game between Tonto and Mo resulted in a fiery argument, and both the yellow and red counters were fired across the room like stones at the Brits. I had never before considered the parts of a board game as lethal projectiles. In the crossfire, I was struck in the eye by a red counter and my eyes watered as if I was crying. "Dry your eyes, mister," commented Colette. I'll deck him for doing that, exclaimed Jerry. What about turning the other cheek, I asked. Wise up, wee lad, said Jerry. Just as I was about to challenge Jerry to a game of pool, over which I hoped to get the chance to chat to him about why not retaliating might be the smarter choice, Billy arrived, smelling of drink. You know you're not allowed in if you've drink taken, Billy, I told him. Billy was only 18 years old, but he looked like he was in his late 20s. He had scars on his face from previous drink-fuelled fights and as a result of a few beatings from the Brits. I haven't touched a drop since the weekend, said Billy. Billy was the worst liar of all the youth club members. While Jerry could convince you that he hadn't really stolen Christine's guitar and sold it for cash in Smithfield Market, Billy's sad and honest eyes gave away every fib. Billy had two burdens to carry in life. One was having such a Protestant name in such a Catholic neighbourhood, and the other, much more tragic, was the trauma of his father's horrific murder in a pub bombing at the start of the Troubles. They burnt him alive, the orange bastards, he would exclaim. I was appalled when the young people described how British soldiers and police officers regularly taunted Billy about his father's murder. They knew what would hurt him the most, and then they used it to harass and torment him. Billy had recently taken to painting KAP, which stood for Kill All Prods, on the walls around the Lower Antrim Road. While the watchful British soldiers were possibly investigating the emergence of a new Republican paramilitary splinter group, I felt that it was just Billy missing his dad. His mother had done her best, but he was stuck on the dole, trapped by the Troubles and drinking too much. I thought that if he had grown up in another place and another time, he would have been a normal teenager. I broke the rules and let Billy in. He would be safer in here messing about with pool cues and threatening me than outside shouting obscenities at the British Army. Aye, you let him in when he's blootered, complained Den, still bitter about being barred from the summer scheme for attempting to sniff a Lynx deodorant in the boys' toilet. I patted Billy on the back and told him to behave himself, or I would get into trouble with the Reverend Taylor for allowing him into the youth club with alcohol on his breath. I returned to the back room, where Jerry was waiting for a battle at the pool table. He beat me convincingly at the game, and we continued our debate about the rights and wrongs of the use of violence to achieve your political objectives. All this Christian shite's all right, said Jerry, but this is war. Them Brits are killing our people every fucking day. Do you expect us to just sit down and take it? Well, they're getting killed too, I argued. Are their lives not valuable too? Is it really worth taking even one human life over who runs a country? The Brits have oppressed and murdered the Irish people for hundreds of years, he said. There'll never be peace until the British are out of Ireland. But how many people are you going to have to kill to achieve that? I asked. What sort of Ireland would it be after all the killing? It's war, repeated Jerry. I was soon to learn that this was the answer to everything. In war, you could justify any violence you inflicted on the enemy, while at the same time burn with righteous anger at any attempt to justify the violence inflicted on your own side. Jerry proceeded to beat me 3 times and celebrated by raising his pool cue above his head like a victorious Zulu holding aloft his spear while chanting intermittently, Chucky Arla and 3-0, 3-0, 3-0, 3-0. This was a typical Tuesday night in the senior youth club. An unpredictable mix of mayhem, aggression, petty theft, clunky evangelism, good conversation and great crack, usually at Big Mickey's expense. Mo stuck chewing gum in Patsy's hair and suffered a serious kick to his testicles as retribution. Flump threatened to rip Joe's arm off for nicking his cigarette lighter. Christine and Lois tried to explain the concept of Christian forgiveness to Colette, and everyone laughed at Big Mickey for hitting a redner when Bernard revealed that Mickey's ma had found his porn magazines under his mattress in his bedroom. The first night marked the first of the weekly sit-ins. This became my main fear during the youth club, second only to my nightmares about a gun or bomb attack on the premises. 3 or 4 of the members of the club refused to leave at closing time and sat on the pool table with their arms folded, chanting, "Sit in, scuffles, and up the ra!" After a long day at work, followed by 2 hours on full alert during the club, the sit-in was guaranteed to test my patience to the limit. And the lads knew it. "Come on, lads, you're really starting to get on my bloody wick," I growled with scant remaining mercy or compassion. "Oh, you're not so Christian now, so you're not," was the jubilant response. Any attempt to remove the protesters would have ended in violence, so we had to rely on talking therapies to solve the weekly drama. I sometimes wondered if this was good preparation for becoming a famous hostage negotiator like Terry Waite in the Middle East. But my failure in the back room of the youth club on the Antrim Road suggested that this was not my vocation. The sit-in the first night only ended after Big Mickey and Marty decided it was boring as fuck and Soup wanted to get home in time to watch the snooker on TV. Once the exhausted youth leaders departed, I finally locked the front door and padlocked the security grills. As the last few youth club members loitered outside the salt shaker under the watchful eye of the British Army watchtower, an RUC police Land Rover sped past. The familiar dull grey paintwork on its armour-plated sides splattered with white paint. "Yo!" shouted Tonto. "We paint-bombed the black bastards last night," boasted Wide-Eyed Den, "for 300 years of British oppression." "Come on, lads. I know you don't like the police, but they're only going to hassle you even more if you throw paint at them," I said. "Like, they're only trying to do their job." "Sure, they're all fucking Huns," scowled Jerry. I was thinking of my cousins, my parents' neighbours and my old school friends who were police officers, who lived under constant threat of assassination by the IRA. To me, the police were human beings, some of whom I knew personally. But to the lads in the youth club, they were a harassing, discriminatory enemy to be resisted, attacked and killed. I wanted to be careful not to sound like I was taking sides, but it was obvious that my experience and views of the police as benevolent keepers of the law and order was out of place on this side of the peace line. I believed the young people when they told me how the police stopped and searched them for no reason, but I assumed it was probably exaggerated to justify killing them. My thoughts of how to argue for peace without sounding like I was arguing for unionism were interrupted by the roar of the police Land Rover doing a sharp U-turn on the road and speeding back towards us. The back doors opened and an open tin of white paint was hurled in our direction. The paint just missed the teenagers and splattered all over the pavement. As the police sped off, I could hear their jeers and laughter. Unaccustomed cheers in an English accent echoed in the British Army watchtower. You see, shouted Dan, "you wouldn't believe they would do that, would you?" He danced around the splattered paint, pointing at it with glee. Look at that, you see, now do you believe us?" "That's terrible," I answered, genuinely shocked. "Fucking black bastards," shouted Mo, followed by a series of more fucks than I had hitherto thought possible to accommodate in a single sentence. "They shouldn't be doing that," I said. "Chucky our la," shouted Jerry. Tonto fired a half-empty can of lilt in the direction of the retreating Land Rover, but our friendly police patrol had disappeared at speed. The next most obvious target was the army, and so the watchtower was attacked with bottles, stones, and shouts of every conceivable foul name for a Brit. "Take it easy, lads," I said. "They have guns in there." I may have been unaccustomed to being attacked by the police, but I was well aware of the dangers of a trigger-happy English teenager in a khaki uniform. The sudden transformation of my youth club members from mischievous and wild but likeable teenagers to young men filled with hatred shocked me. But this was my first direct experience of why the young people felt this way. They had grown up with this. Suddenly, from one side of the streets, an army Saracen arrived on the scene. The young people scarpered instantly, and within seconds the only evidence of them ever having been there were the distant shouts of Chucky our la from a far-off entry. I was left to retreat casually through the doorway of 174 Antrim Road, in the hope that I would not be mistaken as the ringleader of an attack on the British Army. I had grown up assuming that the police only gave you hassle if you were up to something illegal and you deserved it. When nationalists accused the RUC of this sort of behaviour, the unionist politicians denied that it ever happened and called it IRA propaganda. Of course, most Protestants privately admitted that there were dodgy policemen because they knew them personally. But these errant officers were always described as a few bad apples. I had just seen with my own eyes a whole Land Rover full of bad apples. I was learning that on this side of the peace line, the RUC were far from friendly bobbies. I always believed there were two sides to this conflict, but I had only ever heard the other side's views expressed in words. For the first time, I fully understood the saying, never criticise a man until you've walked a mile in his moccasins. I firmly locked all the doors on my way back up to the flat, and I thanked God for keeping us all alive and safe. I was happy that so many young people had turned up and enjoyed the youth club. I was glad to be building a little trust and respect, although worried that we were a target for an attack. As I unfolded my sofa bed and got into my sleeping bag, I could still smell gloss paint from the spots that had splashed onto my mullet. I lay very still in the darkness, listening for evidence of broken windows, forced locks, guns loading and mice. I prayed for Billy, Soup, Den and Jerry, and even for Tonto. Living and working on the other side every day and night for the foreseeable future was clearly going to be an education and a challenge.